I didn't expect him to knock on my door that night. It was close to midnight, the street outside my apartment empty except for the hum of the street lamp and the occasional hiss of a passing car's tires on the wet pavement. I'd been half asleep on my couch, the TV playing some late-night rerun I wasn't really watching, when I heard it, 3 slow knocks. At first I thought I imagined it. But then came the second set, softer, hesitant. When I opened the door, there he was, Dylan. His hoodie was pulled tight around his face, his hair damp from the drizzle. His eyes were tired in a way I wasn't used to seeing. Dylan was the kind of person who always had this easy, lopsided grin, as if he could make light of anything. But that night, his smile was nowhere in sight. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Hey," I echoed, not hiding my surprise. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated, looking down at his sneakers like the words were hard to get out. I didn't know where else to go. Something in my chest tightened. We'd been friends for years, the kind of friends who could go weeks without talking and then pick up like no time had passed. But this, showing up in the middle of the night, was different. I stepped aside without another question. "Come in." The warmth of the apartment seemed to loosen his shoulders a little, though he still hovered near the door. I watched him glance around like he wasn't sure he belonged, like maybe he was ready to leave if I asked. "You want some tea? Or, I don't know, hot chocolate?" I asked. He gave a small smile at that, the first I'd seen all night. "Hot chocolate sounds good." While I busied myself in the kitchen, I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't press him to talk right away. Dylan wasn't the type you could rush. Whatever brought him here tonight, it wasn't something that could be solved with quick answers. When I handed him the mug, he cupped it in both hands like he needed its warmth to seep into him. He took a slow sip, then finally said, "I had a fight with my dad." It wasn't the first time he'd mentioned tension at home, but something about the way he said it, flat, almost resigned, told me this wasn't just any fight. "What happened?" I asked gently. He shrugged, eyes fixed on the steam rising from his drink. "He found out I've been seeing someone." I waited, knowing there was more. "It's a guy," he said finally, barely above a whisper. I set my own mug down, the clink sounding too loud in the quiet room. "Dylan, he didn't take it well," he went on quickly, like if he stopped talking it would choke him. "Said some stuff, yelled. I couldn't stay there tonight." There it was, the raw truth behind the hollow look in his eyes. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound cliché. I didn't want to give him the standard "it'll be okay," because I couldn't promise that. All I could do was be here. So I said the one thing I meant with absolute certainty. "You're safe here." His eyes met mine then, and for a moment I thought he might cry. Instead, he just nodded, almost imperceptibly. We sat in silence for a while after that, sipping our drinks. I told him he could crash on the couch, that I'd grab some blankets. But when I brought them out, he was standing in the doorway to my bedroom, looking unsure. "Is it okay if I stay in here?" he asked. I blinked, caught off guard. He stopped, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't feel like being alone right now." Something in me softened even more. "Yeah, of course." We climbed into bed, both of us lying on our backs at first, the space between us feeling both vast and impossibly close. I could hear his breathing, steady but not quite relaxed. After a few minutes, he shifted closer, his shoulder brushing mine. "You always make me feel safe," he murmured. It was such a simple sentence, but it hit me like a weight in the chest. No one had ever said that to me before. Without thinking, I turned toward him. He hesitated, then rested his head against my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around him, and he let out a breath like he'd been holding it all night. We didn't talk after that. We didn't need to. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I knew, morning light was spilling through the blinds. Dylan was still there, curled against me, breathing slow and even. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't mind waking up this way. For a moment, I just lay there, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. The city outside was already awake. Cars humming down the street, the distant bark of a dog, the faint clatter of someone in the building above moving about their kitchen. But inside my bedroom, it felt like we were in our own little bubble, untouched by whatever storm had driven him here. I didn't want to break it. Dylan stirred against my shoulder, his hair brushing my jaw. He mumbled something I couldn't quite catch before pulling back slightly, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning," I said quietly. He blinked at me, then gave the small, almost embarrassed smile. "Morning." It was the kind of smile people give when they're not sure if they're allowed to be happy yet. "You slept?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Better than I thought I would." There was a pause, his gaze dropping to the sheets. "Thanks for letting me stay." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "You needed a place. I'm glad you came here." His lips pressed into a thin line, like he was holding back words. I didn't push him, not yet. We ended up in the kitchen, making breakfast like it was the most natural thing in the world. He stood barefoot in one of my old t-shirts, pouring pancake batter into a pan while I dug around for the maple syrup. It felt domestic in a way that scared me a little, not because it was bad, but because of how easy it was to imagine this being normal. At one point, he caught me watching him. "What?" he asked, tilting his head with a trace of that old grin. "Nothing," I said quickly, looking away. But the truth was, it had been a long time since I'd seen him look this relaxed. Even if it was just for a fleeting moment, it felt like maybe the night before hadn't broken something in him completely. When we sat down to eat, he was quiet again, his fork pushing food around more than actually eating it. I let him have the silence until he finally spoke. "I don't know what's going to happen when I go back," he admitted. "Part of me thinks maybe I should just not go back for a while." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Where would you go?" He shrugged. "Don't know. I have some friends, but not the kind I could stay with for more than a night or two. They wouldn't get it." I didn't even think before saying it. "You could stay here for as long as you need." His fork froze midair. "I don't want to be a burden." "You wouldn't be." I met his eyes. "Not to me." For a second, I thought he might argue, but instead he just nodded slowly, like he was tucking the offer away in a safe place. The rest of the day passed quietly. He scrolled on his phone while I half-heartedly worked from my laptop. Occasionally, he'd ask me something random, what I was listening to, if I still made that terrible spaghetti sauce from college, and it felt almost like old times. But every so often, I'd catch him staring off, his expression clouded. That was when I'd see the weight he was carrying, the hurt just under the surface. It was late afternoon when he finally said, "I should probably go grab some stuff from my place." I didn't like the idea of him facing his dad again so soon, but I knew he'd have to at some point. "Do you want me to come with you?" He hesitated. "Would you?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm not letting you deal with that alone." When we got there, his dad's car wasn't in the driveway. The relief on Dylan's face was obvious. We went inside, and he headed straight to his room. I stood by the door, unsure if I should give him space or stay close. He packed quickly, a duffel bag of clothes, some books, a framed photo of his mom from years ago. I noticed his hands trembling slightly as he zipped it shut. "You ready?" I asked. "Yeah." But his voice was barely above a whisper. Back at my place, he dropped the bag by the couch and collapsed onto it like all the air had left his body. "I hate feeling like I'm running away," he said, staring at the ceiling. "You're not running," I told him. "You're protecting yourself. There's a difference." He glanced over at me, something unspoken passing between us. It was the kind of look that said he wanted to believe me, even if part of him couldn't yet. That night, he didn't even ask. When I went to bed, he followed. We settled into the same positions as before, his head on my shoulder, my arm around him. This time, it didn't feel like a guest seeking shelter. It felt intentional, like maybe, just maybe, we both needed this. It was later than the night before, but neither of us seemed in a hurry to sleep. The room was dim except for the faint light slipping in from the street lamp outside, casting soft shadows over his face. Dylan lay there, quiet, his breath warm against my shirt. I could feel the weight of whatever thoughts were running through his head. "You ever feel like you don't know who you're supposed to be?" he asked suddenly. His voice was low, like he wasn't sure he wanted me to hear the question at all. Yeah, I said without hesitation. Pretty often, actually. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Everyone always thinks I've got it figured out, but I'm just pretending most of the time. You don't have to pretend here, I told him. That earned me a small glance upward. Yeah. I tightened my arm around him just slightly. You can just be you. Whoever that is, however that looks. I'm not going anywhere. He let out a slow breath, as if he'd been waiting for someone to say those words his whole life. After that, the silence wasn't heavy, it was comfortable. The kind of quiet you only get when someone trusts you enough not to fill every space with noise. I could feel him relax, bit by bit, until his head was fully resting on my chest. The rhythm of his breathing slowed, and I thought maybe he'd drifted off. But then I heard him whisper, "You know, I don't say this kind of stuff much, but last night when you said I was safe here, I believed you." The words caught me off guard. My throat tightened in a way I didn't expect. "I'm glad," I said softly, "because I meant it." He didn't answer right away, but when he did, it was almost too quiet to catch. "You always make me feel safe." It was the second time he'd said it, and it landed even heavier than the first. I didn't know what to do with the weight of it, how to hold it without dropping it. So I just let my hand find his hair, running through it gently until his breathing evened out completely. Sleep came for me sometime after that, but it was the kind of sleep where I woke up more aware of him than of myself. The shift of his weight when he turned, the way his hand curled lightly against my side. When morning came, the world outside was gray with early rain. I made coffee while Dylan sat at the kitchen counter in one of my sweaters, scrolling on his phone. There was something about seeing him in my clothes, hair messy, like he belonged here without question. Over coffee, he said, "I'm not sure when I'll be ready to go back home, if I ever will be." "You don't have to decide right now," I said. "One day at a time." He nodded, taking a sip. "I just don't want to overstay my welcome." "You couldn't," I told him. "Not with me." His eyes flicked up to mine, and for the first time since he showed up at my door, there was a little spark there, like he was starting to believe it. That day passed quietly, like the one before. I worked from home again, and he read on the couch, occasionally showing me something funny on his phone. The rain outside made it easy to stay in, easy to pretend that the rest of the world didn't exist for a while. But that night, something shifted. I was brushing my teeth when he appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Hey," he said. "Hey." I wiped my mouth. "What's up?" He hesitated, then stepped closer. "I don't know how to say this without sounding weird, but being here with you, it feels like I can breathe again." I swallowed. "That's not weird." He searched my face for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Good, because I don't want it to stop." And maybe it was the way the rain pattered against the window, or maybe it was just that we were both tired of pretending. But when I reached out and pulled him into a hug, he didn't let go. Not for a long time. The hug lingered long enough that I could feel the rise and fall of his breathing, the slow unclenching of muscles he probably hadn't even realized were tense. When we finally stepped back, Dylan's eyes held something different. Not lighter exactly, but less guarded. We went to bed without saying much else. But this time, when he slid under the covers beside me, he didn't hover at the edge like he was unsure of his place. He curled in close right away, head tucked under my chin, like we'd been doing this for years. It was strange how quickly my body learned to expect him there. The warmth, the weight, the quiet comfort. It was all starting to feel as necessary as breathing. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up to find him murmuring in his sleep. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was strained, almost pained. Without thinking, I pulled him tighter against me. His breathing steadied after a moment, and I realized just how much I wanted to keep the nightmares away from him. When morning came, the rain had stopped, replaced by pale sunlight filtering through the blinds. Dylan was already awake, lying on his side and looking at me with this unreadable expression. "What?" I asked, my voice rough from sleep. He shook his head slightly. "Just didn't think I'd ever wake up and feel okay again. But I do. At least right now." "That's enough," I said. He smiled faintly, then pushed himself up and stretched. The sweater he'd borrowed hung loose on him, the sleeves too long. He looked so at home in it that I had to stop myself from saying it out loud. We fell into a quiet routine over the next couple of days. I worked, he cooked sometimes, we watched movies at night. Every once in a while, I'd catch him checking his phone, and I knew he was wondering if his dad might reach out. But he never did. One evening, I came out of the shower to find Dylan sitting cross-legged on my bed, staring at the wall. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just thinking." I sat down beside him. "About?" He hesitated, then turned to face me. "Do you ever feel guilty for being happy when someone else is mad at you for it?" I knew exactly what he meant. All the time. It's like, I know I'm not doing anything wrong, but part of me still feels like I am. Like I don't deserve it. I took a breath. You do deserve it. And I know it's hard to believe that when someone you care about is telling you otherwise. But that doesn't make it true. His gaze softened, like he was holding onto my words as tightly as he could. Later that night, as we lay in bed, he whispered, "I'm not sure I've ever felt more like myself than I do here." That stayed with me long after he drifted off. Because the truth was, I was starting to feel it too. This quiet, dangerous sense that maybe, in each other's company, we'd both stumbled into something worth holding on to. The next morning, I woke to find him already making coffee in the kitchen, humming under his breath. It was a simple thing, but it felt monumental, like he'd crossed some invisible threshold from guest to something else. "Morning," I said, leaning against the doorway. He looked up and smiled. "Morning. I made it the way you like it." I took the mug from him, our fingers brushing. "You're getting too comfortable," I teased. "Maybe," he said, smirking just a little. But there was something serious in his eyes when he added, "Is that a bad thing?" I didn't answer right away, because deep down I already knew my answer. "It's not a bad thing," I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. Something passed over his face then, relief maybe, or something heavier. He took a sip from his own mug, eyes holding mine for a fraction longer than necessary, before glancing away. We ended up sitting on the couch that morning, both of us with our coffee, the rain starting again outside. Dylan had curled his legs underneath him, hoodie sleeves pushed up to his elbows, one hand resting lazily against the cushion between us. The movie playing on TV was just background noise. The real focus was the way our conversations kept drifting toward things we'd never said before, like how he hated the silence in his house growing up, because it meant everyone was avoiding each other, or how I'd learned to fill empty rooms with music, just so I wouldn't feel alone. At one point, he leaned his head back against the couch and closed his eyes. "It's weird," he murmured, "how fast you can start to feel like you belong somewhere." I didn't need to ask where he meant. That night, he surprised me. Instead of waiting for me to go to bed first, he grabbed my wrist as I passed him in the hallway. "Hey, you got a minute?" "Sure," I said, stopping. He led me into my bedroom, but we didn't get under the covers right away. We just sat there on the edge of the bed, both staring at the floor like it might hold the right words for us. Finally, he said, "You know when I told you that you make me feel safe?" I nodded. "I didn't just mean safe from other people," he went on. "I meant safe from myself, from the way I can overthink everything until it ruins me." My chest tightened. "You don't ruin things here," I told him. "You don't ruin anything with me." His eyes flicked up to mine, and for a moment, the air between us felt charged. Not in a romantic way exactly, but in that way where someone's trust feels like a living, fragile thing in your hands. He exhaled slowly, then shifted closer until our knees touched. "I don't know what happens next. With my dad. With everything." "You don't have to," I said. "We'll figure it out when we get there." There was a long pause. Then, almost like he couldn't stop himself, he leaned into me, arms looping around my waist. It was tighter than any hug he'd given me yet, like he was holding on for dear life. We stayed like that until the only sound was the rain and our breathing. When we finally lay down, his hand found mine under the blanket. No words.
No hesitación.
Just the quiet acknowledgement that whatever this was, whatever it was becoming, we were both holding it. The days that followed blurred together. Some mornings, we'd wake up tangled in the sheets, sunlight on the wall, and I'd wonder how something that started as a refuge was slowly turning into a home. Not just for him, for me too. But on the fourth morning, everything shifted. I came out of the shower to find Dylan standing by the window, phone in his hand, face pale. "Hey," I said slowly. "What's going on?" He didn't turn right away. "It's my dad." My stomach dropped. "What about him?" "He called," Dylan said finally, voice flat. "He wants to talk. Said he's ready to have a conversation." He made air quotes, but there was no humor in them. I stepped closer. "Do you want to?" He shook his head. "I don't know." Then quieter. "I'm scared that if I do, I'll just end up right back where I started." I didn't touch him right away. I just stood there with him, watching the rain blur the city outside. "Then maybe you wait until you're ready. Or maybe you don't go at all. You get to decide this time." When he finally looked at me, there was a question in his eyes. "You'd still let me stay? Even if I didn't go back?" "I'd still want you to stay," I said, no hesitation. And for the first time, I saw him truly believe it. He didn't answer me right away, just stared like he was memorizing the shape of my face. Then he nodded, slow and deliberate, as if he'd finally set something down he'd been carrying too long. "Okay," he said. We spent the rest of the morning doing nothing in particular. Making toast, passing each other in the narrow hallway. It should have felt ordinary, but there was something in the air, a quiet shift. He wasn't moving around like a guest anymore, careful not to take up too much space. He was here, really here. That night, I found him in the kitchen washing dishes. I told him he didn't need to, but he just shrugged. "Feels good to do something." I leaned against the counter, watching him. "You're settling in." "Guess I am," he said without looking up. "Hope you don't mind." "You already know I don't." He finally glanced over, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah." "Ido." Later, in bed, he lay with his head on my arm, tracing absent circles on the back of my hand. The rain had stopped, leaving the air still and heavy. "You ever think about why certain people make you feel safer than anyone else?" he asked. "All the time," I said. And I thought about it before answering. "I think it's because they see all the parts you're scared to show and don't flinch." He was quiet for a while after that. Then he said, "That's what you do for me." It hit deeper than I expected. I turned my head to look at him, but he'd already closed his eyes, a small, tired smile still there. I pressed my lips lightly to his hair without thinking, and felt him breathe out slow and steady. The days kept passing, and I stopped counting. It was a Thursday when I came home from running errands to find him sitting cross-legged on the couch with his laptop. He looked up. "I was looking at jobs." "Jobs?" I echoed, hanging up my coat. "Yeah. Figure if I'm gonna stay, I should pull my weight." "You don't have to." "I know," he cut in gently. "But I want to. I like it here. I want to feel like I'm building something." I couldn't stop the warmth that rose in my chest at those words. That night, over takeout, he told me about the calls he'd gotten from his dad over the past week. All unanswered. "I'm not ready to deal with it yet," he said, picking at his noodles. "But I'm not running anymore either. I'm just choosing where I want to be." I smiled. "And you want to be here?" He gave me a look like I just asked the dumbest question in the world. "Of course I do." Later, when we climbed into bed, he didn't just curl up beside me. He pulled me in too, his arm draped over my waist. "Thank you," he murmured against my shoulder. "For what?" "For letting me have this. For making me feel like I can breathe." The words sank in, deep and certain. And in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't dared put into words until then. I didn't just want him to stay until he figured things out. I wanted him to stay, period. When sleep finally came, it was with his hand still resting in mine. The following weekend, we didn't leave the apartment once. It wasn't planned, it just happened. Saturday morning rolled in with soft sunlight through the blinds, and Dylan was still asleep, sprawled on his stomach, hair a mess against the pillow. I made coffee and sat on the edge of the bed, nudging his shoulder until he cracked one eye open. "Morning," he mumbled, voice rough. "Morning. Coffee?" That got him to roll over and sit up, stretching like a cat before taking the mug from my hands. He sipped slowly, eyes closing like it was the first time in days he'd let himself just be. We spent the day drifting between the couch and the kitchen, making pancakes we didn't finish, starting movies we didn't end. It felt like time had loosened its grip on us. At one point, we were sitting cross-legged on the floor, playing a stupid card game neither of us remembered the rules to. Dylan looked at me, grinning in that unguarded way that felt rare even now. "This is the happiest I've felt in months," he said. It was casual, tossed out between rounds, but it sat with me. I didn't tell him that hearing it made something inside me steady, like maybe all the quiet moments were adding up to something bigger. By evening, the air outside had cooled, and Dylan pulled a blanket over both of us on the couch. He rested his head against my shoulder, his hand brushing mine under the fabric. The TV was still on, but neither of us was watching. "You know what's weird?" he said softly. "What?" "I don't think about leaving anymore. Not like I did at first. I keep waiting for the part where I start to feel out of place, but it hasn't happened." I turned my head toward him. "That's not weird. That's good." He gave a small smile but didn't answer right away. Then, after a beat, "Do you ever think about what this is?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean this, whatever we're doing." I thought about it, about the nights, the mornings, the in-between moments where his presence felt less like a choice and more like a fact of life. "I think it's two people taking care of each other," I said finally. His eyes softened. "Yeah, I like that." We stayed like that until the sun dipped low and the room dimmed. Eventually, we moved to bed, the blanket still wrapped around us, as if we couldn't stand to break whatever had been holding us together all day. That night, with the lights off and the quiet pressing in, Dylan spoke again. "You always make me feel safe," he whispered, almost like he was talking to himself. The words hung in the dark between us. I reached for his hand, finding it easily under the covers. "And you can stay as long as you need, even if that's forever." I felt him still beside me, and then, slowly, his fingers tightened around mine. "Okay," he breathed. And that was it. No big declaration, no defining moment, just a quiet agreement in the dark that whatever this was, neither of us wanted to let it go. When I woke the next morning, the sunlight was warm, his arm was still around me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to fall apart. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of our lives began to settle into something familiar, comfortable, and unexpectedly tender. Dylan no longer hesitated at the door or lingered awkwardly in the kitchen. He made his own coffee, puttered around the apartment, even started rearranging books and photos in little ways that made the place feel shared. I caught myself watching him sometimes, the way he moved through the space with an ease he hadn't had the first night, and a quiet smile would tug at my lips. One evening, we sat on the balcony, sharing a bottle of wine while the city lights flickered below. Dylan leaned back against me, resting his head on my shoulder. I could feel the tension he carried every day just a month ago melt away, and it made my chest ache. Not with sadness, but with the bittersweet recognition of how fragile, how precious comfort could be. "You ever think about how weird it is," he murmured, "that we went from strangers with a casual friendship to this?" I smiled, pressing a kiss to his temple. "It's not weird. It's natural. Maybe late, maybe unexpected, but natural." He turned slightly to look at me, eyes glistening in the glow of the city lights. I don't want this to end." "You don't have to worry about that," I said, voice low. "Not if we both keep being honest. Not if we keep choosing each other." He smiled softly, leaning back into me. "Choosing each other," he repeated. "I like that." That night, when we went to bed, it was with the same quiet closeness as before, but something had shifted. Neither of us reached for our phones. Neither of us looked for distractions. We just existed together, two halves of a fragile whole finally allowed to rest. And when Dylan whispered again, "You always make me feel safe," I didn't hesitate. I held him tighter, letting the warmth of my body reassure him, letting the rhythm of my heartbeat become a constant he could rely on. "You always make me feel safe too," I admitted softly. A small laugh, half disbelief, half joy, escaped him. "Then I guess we're even," he said. That week, we started taking little walks together, just around the block at first. He laughed at how seriously I studied every sidewalk crack, every uneven curb, like I was mapping out a safe passage. I laughed with him, realizing that sometimes the simplest acts, walking side by side, sharing a smile, could be the kind of intimacy that held more weight than any grand gesture. There were still moments of doubt. Phone calls we ignored, texts from family left unanswered, the occasional pang of guilt about his dad. But whenever the fear started to creep in, one look at Dylan's calm, trusting expression was enough to remind me, and him, that he wasn't alone anymore. Not ever. One late evening, he lay with his head on my chest, tracing patterns absent-mindedly with his fingers. "I used to think I'd never feel like this," he said. "Like I could actually be myself without hiding. But I do. Here." I pressed a kiss to his temple. "That's because you let yourself." He smiled softly, eyes closing.
No.
"It's because you let me." And that, more than anything, felt like the start of something neither of us had dared to hope for. I held him through the night, and when morning came, there was no rush to leave, no anxiety pressing against our shoulders. Just sunlight, warmth, and the quiet certainty that some safe places, some people were worth staying with. And Dylan stayed, until morning, until the next night, until every day after that, building a life that neither of us had expected but both had been longing for. Because sometimes, the simplest words, "You always make me feel safe," are enough to change everything. And sometimes, staying is the bravest thing you can do.